welcome back to the next talk. When we made up the agenda for the AD and Entra track, we had so many good submissions, but nevertheless, we thought that there is one missing, and that's the one about securing hybrid identities. With this, let's welcome Nestori. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, and after some technical issues, we are finally good to go. Yeah, so welcome everybody to my talk about how to secure hybrid identities. Now, this talk is not about is hybrid identity good or bad. It's just the fact that there are hybrid configurations, so I want to tell how to secure them. So if the world would be perfect, you would go to cloud-only and passwordless, but that doesn't happen for a couple of years, I would suppose. Okay, so I'm going to start today by talking about hybrid identity, what it is. Then I'm going to go through four different components. So Entra Connect Sync, Entra Cloud Sync, password authentication, and then finally Identity Federation, and especially ADFS. Yeah, so this next thing comes from my friend from Finland, Jussi, who about a year ago, he tweeted a new policy for talks like this. So always use the worst picture of yourself in the slide text. So when people actually see you live, they think, okay, he's not that bad. So hello, everybody. So my name is Dr. Nestori Syynimaa, as was introduced. And I work as a principal identity security researcher at Microsoft Threat Intelligence Center. So basically, they pay me to do my hobby. And what I do at Mystic, as it's pronounced, so I have two things that are part of my job. First is to find vulnerabilities before the bad guys do. So as Dirkian said, the idea that fix bugs before they are published, I like the idea. Now we can do that. And the second one is that I want to educate people, and that's why I'm here today. So I'm going to tell you about what can be done and how to protect against them. I also created a tool called A8 Internals. Who has used that or heard about that? It's created with the most powerful scripting language called PowerShell. And I have some stickers with me. And also, if you have a very good question, you will have a challenge coin. But just one, so only one good question. And then what else? About the troopers, so I always love being here. This is my fourth time here. And it has always been like a starting for, let's say, conference season. So last year I gave talk here. I gave the same talk 10 times after that. So so you will all have a new content, so nothing from the last year. Okay, so let's start. First with the quote. I'm not sure if the guy here is the first one, but that's the first one or earliest I found. So hackers don't break in anymore, they log in. And what does that mean? So basically, because everything is in the cloud, you just can log in there. In the past, you had to be able to break into network or system and then log in. But now you just can log in. And this is from our digital defense report from last year. And as it says that 99% of all the attacks are password attacks. Not successful necessarily, but they are attacks. Somebody tries to log in using your credentials, maybe do some phishing and that kind of things. But anyways, they are focused on passwords. And less than 1% is something else, like MFA attacks or post-authentication attacks, like stealing tokens, and then infrastructure compromise, which is usually done by very bad actors, like some, let's say, Russian actors or Chinese actors and so on. So they are usually backed by some nation or state, and they have resources and they have time and money to do that. Now, that's why we are focusing on that one in this talk. And let's start by talking about what is hybrid environment. So with Entra ID, you have some hybrid authentication options. Here are a couple of those, not all, but the most important ones. So back in the days, if you wanted to use like the same set of credentials in on-prem and in cloud, you had to use ADFS or some other federation, not necessarily ADFS, but in this case, ADFS. And here, what happens is basically Entra is trusting that identity federation or identity provider, and then whenever you log into that identity provider, and then you come back to Entra with some token, it trusts that you are who you are. But then came password hash synchronization, which requires a little bit less hardware. And basically what it's doing is that it's synchronizing password hashes, hashes of password hashes from your on-prem AD to Entra, so that you can log in using same username and password. And it is using Entra Connect or Cloud Sync. And that is actually quite an important component because basically any or all hybrid methods are relying on this component because it is synchronizing not just passwords but objects. So regardless which authentication you are using, the object is usually synchronized using Entra Connect or Cloud Sync. Then we have a password authentication, which is meant for people who don't want to keep their passwords in the cloud owned by Microsoft. So in this case, you install an agent in your on-prem computer, which calls back to Entra. And then whenever you try to log in, Entra is encrypting your credentials, and they are sent to the agent, and then agent tries to log in using those credentials. So that's the password authentication. And finally, we have a certificate-based authentication, but we are not going to talk about that today, so we can just skip that. Okay, about cloud security. So this is a slide I have used in many talks during the years. And cloud is easy for users because you just log in. You give your username and password or any other like proof of identity, and you're good to go. But for bad guys, it's not that easy anymore because they don't have your credentials. They can do like phishing attacks or they can just do brute force attacks. And that's the 99% of the attacks we have witnessed last year. But then, if you have the hybrid environment, you have the on-prem environment, right? And you know the bad guys knows how to, break in. And when you attach your cloud to on-prem, you open like a pipe to that very secure environment run by us. So what happens now is that if the bad guy is able to, compromise any of these components, they can get in and own your tenant in the worst case. So that's kind of we are trying to focus on today. So what is possible and from the attack point of view and what we can do about that. Okay, I know we have some guys from SpecterUp, so they know the quote here from John Lambert. He's our corporate vice president and a security fellow. So basically what he says is that attackers think in graphs and defenders think in lists. And as long as that is true, attackers will win. So I'm going to use a lot of graphs in my presentation, but also some lists for defenders, so we are safe. Okay, let's start with Entra Connect Sync. Who is using this? Okay, and others are lying, I suppose. So as I said, what it does is, so basically the whole purpose of this component is to get objects from Entra ID and push them to, other way around, from on-prem AD and push them to Entra, but also other way around some cases. And the Entra ID Connect is using Entra ID-based identity. It's either user or application. So let's see what kind of the graph would be related to attack against Entra Connect Sync. So we have an Entra Connect that is using a secret. And that secret has access to certain services. So here we have AWS, so it's not the Amazon Web Services, but admin web service. Then we have MS Graph, and we have AAD Graph and Provision API, but those are deprecated, so let's not talk about those. And then those different services have access to Entra. Now, how the attack works? Well, the Entra Connect is running on a server, and servers have admin roles, and some guy, in this case Bob, has the admin role. And what this means is that the admin has access to the secret, so admin can either read or use the secret. So this means that we have like 4 different edges between the nodes. So graph is like nodes and edges. So first one is like this admin stuff. So if Bob doesn't have admin permissions, that doesn't happen. So it's easy. So we could stop here, but I know that you have admins there. So I also want that you think like a defense in depth, so that we go. So what if the worst happens? So somebody gets admin permissions to that server. What can we do about that? So we have like 4 edges we want to eliminate or limit the access. So let's start. So we have admin who wants to get access to that secret. So we have 2 types of the secret. So we have username and password. So that's the old way to do that. I can't remember which version this changed, but quite lately in this month or at the end of May. So admin can read that. So if admin gets access to that server running AD Connect, Entra Connect, you can read the secret. And by reading, I mean that you can read the secret, go somewhere else, and then use them wherever you want to. So that's what the read means. Then we also have the application and certificate, which is the modern one. And you have also 2 options there. So where do you store the private key? So if you are running a computer that doesn't have TPM or Trusted Platform Module, it is stored on disk. And guess what? Admin can read that. Okay? But if you store the private key on TPM, admin can only use that. Which means that if somebody breaks in your server running this component, and you are on the server, then you can do all the things that you could do with that secret. But however, it requires that you have a persistent access to that server. If you can read, you can just go there once, get whatever you want, and go somewhere else. Now that was the case, but then there's a guy in SpecterOps called Daniel Heinsen who reminded us in a blog post a couple of weeks ago that this application can actually add secrets to itself. And why is this? I suppose because, like here we have the application and certificate, it needs to be updated because the certificate is valid only for 6 months. And that's why the application must have permissions to add those new secrets to itself. So basically it means that we are back to square one. So if you can use the secret, so you are a compromised computer that has TPM, you can use that secret to add new secret that you already know to the application. But at least we can detect that. So we can detect if like somebody is adding new secrets to that application more often than, let's say, 6 months, which I remember, I think was the normal cadence. So every 6 months it's adding new, it's updating itself. Let's put it this way. Okay, and I don't know why I put in the abstract that this is a demo pact, but I guess you want to see demos, so let's see some demos. So I always do that mistake, and then I have like 50 slides, and oh, I promised to show some demos. Okay, this doesn't look nice. Because I have multiple displays and I don't know where my mouse is. There it is. So I have demos, but they are in this monitor here, which you can see. So this is a demo effect. Just a second. Go grab a drink or something.
Tell a joke and finish. We would dance.
Do what? That's at the end. Who creates these operating systems? Okay, now we go. That's better. Okay, that way. Okay. So let's start with the traditional one. So this is the Entra ID Connect Sync using the traditional username and password. And I have my toolkit here created in PowerShell. And I need to get the credentials, so I can say get AAD int sync credentials, like this. And now we have them. And these are disabled users, so you can feel free to take pictures, they won't work anyway. But anyway, like now we have the AAD user that is used by this Connect, and you have a password. And now with those credentials, you can log in from anywhere and do whatever the sync account can do. Okay, then let's go to the second one. And this is now using the new application identity, but there's no TPM. Come on. Sync credentials. So now we got the credentials, but it also says that it is using certificate. So please use another command, which is part of this module that has not published yet. But anyway, as we can see, the user is now a GUID and then the domain. And this GUID is like the identity of the application. And then the password here is actually like a SHA-256 of the certificate that is used. But now let's try to export the certificate like this. And because it's not stored on TPM but on disk, now it just went there and got the certificate. Now with the certificate, you can do again whatever the synchronization account can do. Okay, and then for the third one, and now this is using TPM. So let's see what happens now. It's beeping again, okay. And now it's said that you can export that. I mean the private key, we have the certificate, but not the private key, so you don't do anything with this. However, now because we are logged in, we can ask TPM kindly to sign the request for us, so effectively that's the same. And Dirk can actually publish the tool about, well, you created the tool, you didn't publish that yet, which does pretty much the same. So you will have these tools quite soon that you can test your own security posture for these attacks. So that's how, or what you can do there, and we have some options now. But that was like access to the secret. Then the third one was like access to services. So let's talk about that a bit. So you have two types of secrets. So you have a username and certificate. Sorry, password and certificate. And username, you can be assigned to a role, and that limits access to AWS or the admin web service. So it means that you need to have the directory and synchronous accounts role or global admin so that you can access that service. Otherwise, you can't. And then you have, well, we have talked about conditional access policy a lot. So Entra ID evaluates everything because this is using Entra ID authentication. So when we try to access something, conditional access policies are evaluated. And you can assign those to, it limits access to both AWS and Microsoft Graph. And you can assign that to a user. So it could be the sync user, for instance. You can assign them to a role. So it could be the direct synchronization accounts role. So everybody who is in that role, you can have a conditional access policy which says, okay, you can only log in from this IP address, and so on. And then you can also assign that to an application or service principal. But it requires that you purchase a thing from us called workload identities. And with that, you can also have conditional access policies for the application. So basically, that's how you can limit access to services. So even though somebody is able to get your access to your key or secret, then with these you can limit the place radius, if you will. So if you are using the username and password, for instance, always use the conditional access policy that limits the usage of that to a certain IP address which you own. Okay. Then access to Entra ID. So let's imagine that you're able to pass that. So you have now access to services, but now access to Entra. So in Entra, we have two kinds of objects. So we have the cloud-only objects and then synchronized objects. And the secret has access to two services here. So the admin web service and Microsoft Graph. And the admin web service has only access to synchronized objects. So you can set password, if that's allowed in your configuration. And the CRUD means that create, update, delete. So they can only modify objects that are synchronized. Whereas Microsoft Graph, you can only modify cloud objects. Well, actually, you can also delete synchronized objects, but just it's not relevant here. So now, if you have a certain permissions added to secret, you can limit access to Microsoft Graph. So when an application is defined in your tenant, you can say that these are the scopes that you can use, and these are the things that you can do with this secret. But now, in admin web service, there are two things that are not available anywhere else. So you have things called hard match and soft match. And these are for the situation, so way back time, like 15 years ago, when people were started to first time use like cloud services. So they usually started with a pilot. So they added users to the cloud, created mailboxes and Skype and whatever. And they tried that for, let's say, like 6 months. And now you want to move everybody else there too. But you have the identities already on the on-prem, and you don't want that the existing users in the cloud, they would lose like their email boxes or Skype things or whatever, or SharePoint sites and so on. So now when you synchronize, you have two options to match the on-prem users to the cloud users. And effectively, what this means that these can make existing cloud object to a synchronized object, like this. So they may become. And may become means that that is possible if this cloud object, like user, is not an admin. Okay? However, if the user is, if you are using the PIM and it's eligible for admin role, then it's not an admin yet, it's just a user. So it can be synchronized, and when it's synchronized, it's now synchronized object, then you can set the password for that user, and then whenever that comes to an admin, you can log in as that user, as an admin. So, yeah. But luckily, there are things that we can do with that. So here is the list for the vendors, because now that we know the graph and we know the edges we want to, limit or block, this is what we can do. So first of all, you need to limit access to server. So this is you need to protect that in the same level that you protect your domain controllers. And then you can limit access to secret. So I suggest that you use the application identity with TPM. Again, there's still risk if somebody is able to compromise your computer and stay there. They can do things, but otherwise they can get the secret out of there, and that's the most important. Limit access to services, use conditional access policy and workload identities, and then limit access to Entra. So block all those soft and hard matches because you don't need them anymore. So just block them. There's no use case for you. And then, of course, limit the access to graph and so on. Okay, then let's move to Entra Cloud Sync. Who is using that? Some, okay. So basically, it does the same as the previous one, except that it doesn't use Entra ID identities. It is using certificate-based authentication. And let's see how this works. So we have this thing called provisioning agent that is doing this stuff, and it has a configuration, and it also has a secret. A secret has access to a thing called HIS, or Hybrid Identity Service, and that is using an Entra ID identity, a user called AD to AD Sync Service account, and that user has access to Entra. And the secret here is managed by a thing called Bootstrap service, which means that if a secret is getting old, it will renew that. But the challenge here is that the secret has access to Bootstrap service, which means that it can say that, give me a new secret. My certificate is expiring, give me a new one. And again, what happens here is that you are running this on a server, there's an admin group, and again, Bob has admin role. And if you have access, if you are an admin, you can read the secret, because that's never stored on TPM. It's just by design, so that's how it works. And I put maybe some more, too much information here, but Microsoft support can delete your provision agent identity from the backend side. You can do that. Okay, so we have the attack part here. So you can admin, you can read the secret, and you can also like use that. But anyway, you can read the secret, which means that you can get your secret, get it to a computer you are controlling, and then you can like impersonate that agent. And what happens is that when you do that, Entra ID will send you that, hey, give me users from this OU, or do you have any new passwords? And because you control that agent, you can answer anything. So it doesn't matter what it's asking, you can send anything pretty much there, what you want to. And the secret has then access here, and so on and so on. But what is interesting with this is that when you have the secret outside, and now it's expiring, let's say, 1 week, you can use that secret, access Bootstrap service, and ask a new certificate. So that's like a gift that keeps continuing to keep. So that's like a persistent way, and you don't know that there are another of these things. So what we can do here then, so we can of course limit access to server. We can prevent access to services, so we can delete the configuration from Entra, which means that then the agent doesn't work anymore. And if you want to delete the agent identities, you can contact us and we will do that. And then you can also prevent access to Entra ID by disabling or removing the account. If you are using that, don't remove that. Just disable that for a little while so that everything is back to normal. And then you can, start enable that again. Okay, let's then move to password authentication, which I actually wrote my master's thesis 2 years ago. So I kind of love this thing. But anyways, technically this is the same as the Entra ID Cloud Sync, so it's using the same technology. So the attack graph is pretty much same, so we can do this a little bit faster, but it's just a different service, but it's the same agent, and that actually should say password authentication agent, but anyways, technically it's using the same Same thing, except that you don't have the sync account here, because you are not syncing anything. So now, how this password authentication thing works is that you log in to Entra. Entra gets your username and password. They encrypt those using the secret, this one here, the public part of that, and they send those to that agent. Agent decrypts those, tries to log in, and at that point, the agent has username and password. Okay, it doesn't know are they like valid, but you have them. And then the real agent, what it's doing is that it tries to log into your on-prem AD using those credentials. But okay, the thing is same as with the previous one. So we have this attack path. So you can read the secret, you can get it to a computer which you are controlling, then you can impersonate that agent, and then you will get username and passwords, which you can decrypt because you have the secret. So that's not that good thing, I would say. And again, you can update the secret by accessing the Bootstrap service. So what can we do here then? So again, we can limit access to server, but besides that, there really isn't much we can do. Except if you want to prevent access to service, if you know that something has been compromised, so you can disable PTA, and that doesn't work anymore. Or you can contact Microsoft and say that, okay, I think that these agents are compromised, could you delete the identities? And after that, they can't log in anymore. Okay, then to the last one, federated identity. And what happens here is that when you log into Entra, you come there through an identity provider which creates you a token of some kind, and it's signed by private key. And Entra ID trusts the public part of the key, the certificate, and then they can verify that this is really done by this provider, third party I trust. So let's see how that goes. So we have Entra ID, and we have identity provider, and identity provider is using a certificate and to create a token, and it can be any token, and token represent an object in Entra ID. And Entra ID trusts the certificate, and this token is signed by that certificate. So basically, if you have that certificate, then you can be anybody you want to in the tenant. And this is like a general one. But let's now jump to ADFS, because that's the one you usually are using if you have your on-prem hybrid identity. If you are using Okta or Ping, this is the same, but the next is only related to ADFS. And I also gave talk about this 2 or 3 years ago, so if you want to see the whole thing, go back there. So there are slides and recording are out there. So ADFS, they are using the certificate. Entra ID trusts that certificate, and ADFS is run on server. They have, again, admin group, and Bob is member of that group, so Bob has admin permissions. And now any admin can read or can use the certificate. It depends, and let's see how that what options we have. So you want to access the ADFS token signing certificate, which is the main component here. So we have 2 types. So we have managed one. A managed means that ADFS is managing that. So if they are getting old, they are creating a new self-signed certificates and then send them to cloud, so that Entra ID knows which one to trust. And then we have the custom one, which means that you need to create the certificates and you need to make them up to date and also update those to cloud. Now, the managed ones are stored on disk, well, technically to database, but database is on disk, and if you are an admin, you can get access to those. But the custom one, so you have different options, so you can also store them to disk, or you can store them to TPM or HSM, hardware security module. And as I said, the admin can read anything on disk, so that's not a good thing. But if it's stored on TPM or HSM, you can only use them. So basically, we want to get rid of these. So we want to use custom certificates, which are stored on some like a secure place. Now, for the next demo, I created a Azure subscription. I added there a server, I made it ADFS. Then I also configured a thing what is called Azure Cloud HSM, which means that there's a component there which you can then access from these ADFS servers. I was supposed to give you a live demo, but it ate my credits, so I need to give you a like recorded one. That what happens if you try to read the certificates from a ADFS that is using HSM. And now we have video for that. So again, using my PowerShell toolkit, and we want to export those certificates. And if you use the verbose, it usually shows what it's doing, but now it says that unable to access private key, probably HSM bound, and then it shows the provider where the key is, and it says Cavium key storage provider, and this Cavium, I suppose it's an internal name for Azure Cloud HSM. But anyway, it just proves that please use that, because then you can get the keys. But again, you can use them. So if you're on the computer, you can say that, please sign this SAML token, and then you can use that. But that again requires like persistent access to server. Okay, then exploiting the trust. So Entra ID, it has objects, and the token represents those objects. And the objects have things like signing domain, and there are two types. We have federated domain and managed domain. And the certificate I mentioned, which in this case is on ADFS, it is attached to a federated domain. Now, the object also have some different attributes called immutable ID, and the token has that attribute also. But Entra is a funny thing, so it only validates that the immutable ID exists. So this means that regardless of like which kind of domain you are using, so as long as you have a token that is signed by any of the managed domain certificates and it has an immutable ID that exists, you are that user. So you impersonate that user. Well, there's also luckily things that we can do. So again, limit access to server, and then limit access to ADFS certificate. So use the HSM or TPM. TPM is a little bit more tricky. I didn't manage to do that for the demo purposes, but you can do that. And then limit the trust. So there is a setting that you can say. So one of the features in the token is that it can have a claim that says that I already did MFA. But with the first setting here, you can say that don't trust that. And the second one is that you can set, so we don't have very good documentation for that. I might write a blog about that. But you can set the federated token validating policy. And then you can use this for all domains. And now it doesn't allow you to get in using like golden SAML attacks unless they are for the same domain. Because it used to be that you just create a SAML token, the domain doesn't matter, just this immutable ID matters, but now also the user's domain name matters. So it limits this attack if that happens. Okay, yeah, and this wasn't actually paid commercial, but here is some dancing at the end. So thank you. And do we have any questions?
Thank you. Any questions?
You mentioned for the Connect sync that there is no scenario to use hard match, soft match in normal operations. there is a scenario, I talked about it last year, is during a recovery.
AD recovery.
Yeah, all
Or
that stuff.
entry recovery,
Then
yeah.
you need it.
Yep.
Again, in a normal scenario, I agree, but in recovery, you don't need it. Sorry, you need the hard match stuff. So you would need to re-enable that feature again to make it work.
Yeah, that's doable.
Yeah, okay.
But by default, turn it off.
Yeah.
And if you need it, turn it on. So yeah, that's doable. Because back in the days, actually, so if you say that, okay, I want to use Entra Connect, you couldn't turn it away. So it's there always, but now you can turn that also.
Yeah, it's just a comment that if you turn it off and probably forget about it, and then you have the whole recovery and fixing it, and stuff just goes wrong because it's off.
Yeah,
so
that's a
you
good
need
point.
to turn it
Yeah.
on again. Yeah. Okay.
I need to add that to my slides.
And if you ask Microsoft to turn it off, how is the process secured?
Well, it's just like, I can't remember which API you need to call, but you can just do it yourself. So just log in and
Isn't the hard matching, soft matching regulated by the Connect Sync server itself? Because that's where the whole thing is glued together.
No, it's not. But I had a link there in the slide, so you can go and see how it goes. But
Okay.
yeah, because it would be like a bad thing if you can compromise the Entra Connect and you have disabled those, and if you can use that identity to turn them on again. So that wouldn't be like a security feature.
Hi, thanks for the great talk. To what extent did you look at detection? So by adding the hardening, are then the naive attackers really standing out, and are there detections already for some of this?
Yeah, so this wasn't about detection, so that's why I couldn't include everything there. But for ADFS, for instance, there's a talk from 2 years or 3 years back. So there are things how you can do that, and there are other things where you can look into. But in this case, they were just not included in the talk. Sorry about that. But there are plenty of things that, like there's guys in the front row who do that for a living. So.
With the Entra Cloud Sync part, you mentioned when I extract the secret, I can go to the service itself and ask for the new secret to be updated. Can the attacker do this from somewhere else, or has it to be from the machine?
It can be anywhere.
And would the machine then stop syncing, or since it's accessing the secret itself, it will just get the updated one?
Well, in that case, there will be 2 new certificates because the service will update itself, but that's totally fine. That's how it works. So you can have multiple secrets per one agent at any given time. Well, actually, I think maximum is like 10. And if it's more, it's like oldest one will drop out. But
Hi, thanks for the great talk. As an attacker, I wonder if there's a good method to find the synchronization server in an on-prem ID. Like, is there an LDAP object, or does it expose like named pipes or something that I can find?
So I missed the question part. So which account you're talking about?
Like on Identities, I would now hunt for the server where the synchronization service is running to compromise the server and jump to Entra ID. And is there a good methodology to find this server in an on-prem ID, like an LDAP object where this is pointing to?
Yes. So basically, if you are if you have access to Entra, let me try see if I have a session open. Or are we running late? Well, we are running late. Sorry about that. So quickly, yes. So in Entra, you can see that there's a sync user, and part of that name is the server name. So if you find the correct synchronization user, you can, know the server name. So yeah.
Hi, thanks for the talk. I just had a question about the soft and hard matching features. You said it's recommended to turn them off because mostly people don't need it. Are they enabled per default on new tenants currently? And if so, why?
Yes, and the other one was very good question.
More good questions. Okay. Thank you, Nestori.
Thank you.
We will continue at 2:30. 2:15.